"Grandpa, my parents are going to take your money after the party today," whispered my 9-year-old granddaughter. I just smiled, slipped away, and what I did next left everyone in shock. You know, some days, a whisper can hit harder than a tidal wave. They thought they could just walk in, slide a pen across the table, and steal my house right out from under me. But they didn't know the silent warning from a 9-year-old would ignite a fire in me they could never put out. "Grandpa, my parents are going to take your house tonight," my granddaughter whispered. Her words, soft as they were, crashed over me like a rogue wave against the rocks, shattering the calm I'd carefully built in the years since Evelyn passed. Me, a grandfather who had always kept his door, his wallet, and his heart wide open for them. I stood there, my face as steady and unreadable as it had been at Evelyn's funeral, but inside, a shockwave hit. My mind, though, was already racing. What I did next wasn't just about stopping their plan, it was about turning it into a trap they'd never see coming. I was going to beat them at their own game, and they were never, ever going to forget it. The sharp warning from Lily was just the culmination, though. The first ripple, that little hint of something off, had started earlier that morning. "Dad, I need you to hear me out." Nathan's voice cracked over the phone, cutting right through the comforting hum of my kettle and the steady rhythm of the waves beyond my porch. It was just after 7 a.m., and Nathan never called that early, not unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. And his voice, it carried a tremor I hadn't heard since he was a wild 17-year-old who'd put a tire-sized dent in my old truck. "What's going on, son?" I asked, leaning back in my kitchen chair, watching the steam coil from my mug as the morning sun painted the old oak table in long, warm rectangles of light. "Clara and I were talking. We think it's important you come early to Lily's birthday party today." He rattled off the words too fast, too rehearsed, like he was reading from a script. "Early?" I replied, a slight frown creasing my brow. "Nathan, you know I've never missed one of her birthdays." There was a brief, awkward pause. I caught a faint murmur in the background, Clara's voice, sharp and insistent, like a drill sergeant. Then Nathan's tone shifted, losing that fragile, rehearsed quality. "She wants to make sure you're there. Party starts at 2, but maybe come around 1:30. We've got some family stuff to talk through." My grip tightened on the mug. Family stuff wasn't a phrase Nathan used often, and certainly never in the 3 years since Evelyn passed away. It felt ominous. "What kind of family stuff?" I kept my voice light, casual, but my stomach had already gone cold. A premonition, a dread that felt all too familiar from years in business. "Just planning for the future, making sure everyone's taken care of," he said, and that phrase, that one right there, made my hackles rise. I'd heard it too many times in boardrooms and backroom deals. When people said everyone, they usually meant themselves first, with everyone else a distant second. Still, I played along. "Of course, I'll be there early. Wouldn't miss it." I hung up, but the unease stayed, a silent, unwelcome guest in the room, refusing to leave. Hours later, as the party preparations hummed around the house, Lily found me on the porch. Her small hand clutched my sleeve, her eyes starting nervously around the yard before she leaned in with her confession. In her voice, I heard both profound fear and the kind of fierce bravery that no child should ever have to possess. "I heard them last night," she said, her words quick and low, barely a whisper. "They were in the kitchen. Mom said, 'You're too old to live here alone.' And Dad said something about the bank papers. She told him it would be too late for you to stop it." My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice steady, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Did you hear anything else?" Lily nodded, biting her lip. "Dad said, 'What if he finds out?' And Mom said, 'By then it'll be done.'" I knelt down, so we were eye to eye, her small, worried face reflecting mine. "You did absolutely the right thing telling me, sweet pea. But for now, this stays between us, okay?" She hesitated, her little brows furrowed. "Will you still love me if they get mad?" My heart ached, a sharp, twisting pain, but my answer was firm, unwavering. "Nothing they do, Lily, nothing at all, could ever change how much I love you." She gave me a tiny, solemn nod, but I could still feel the immense weight she carried. I told her to go help Clara with the party, masking our conversation with a smile that felt brittle on my face. From the porch, I watched Nathan laughing with neighbors, his gestures big and animated, the perfect host. Clara stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on his arm, her eyes scanning my property the way a broker sizes up a hot listing. They didn't know that a crack had already formed in their perfectly laid plan. The air was laced with salt and cedar, and the ocean lay calm beyond the dunes, but my mind was anything but. It was already moving, calculating, cataloging. Evelyn's voice, clear as a bell, echoed in my memory. "Arthur, don't let pride make you reckless, but don't let fear make you small." She'd known Nathan's weaknesses, warned me once, years ago, to keep a close eye on him, when someone else was doing the talking for him. Back then, I thought she meant his college friends, the ones who always seemed to lead him astray. Now, with a chilling clarity, I saw she meant Clara. I walked inside and set the kettle to boil, more for the comforting cover of sound than for any actual tea. I opened the drawer where I keep my legal pads, those familiar yellow ones I've used for every house design, every intricate budget, every serious plan in my life. I wrote the date, then 3 chilling words: papers from bank. Clara's banking background wasn't extensive, but it was enough for her to know how to package something dangerous, something predatory, in the benign wrapping of help. In my years running a firm, I'd dealt with power of attorney forms, conservatorship petitions, and the slow, suffocating processes that can strip a man of his assets and his autonomy without him even realizing the noose has tightened. If they wanted to play legal chess, they'd find out I've been a builder my whole life, one who knows exactly how to shore up a foundation before a storm hits. The rest of the morning passed in the usual pre-party bustle, the sweet smell of frosting, the comforting aroma of coffee, the faint rustle of gift wrap. Margaret Cole, my neighbor and a retired bank officer, stopped by with a dish for the party. She greeted me with her usual warmth, then, in a lowered voice, mentioned seeing Nathan and Clara downtown 2 days ago. Walking out of the bank with a thick stack of papers, she'd said, her brow furrowed. Looked official, and they seemed in a hurry. I thanked her, filed that crucial piece of information neatly beside Lily's warning, and felt the pieces of their insidious puzzle locking chillingly together. By 1 p.m., I was dressed and ready. The gifts for Lily, an art set and a bird-watching guide, were stacked by the door. I arrived at Nathan's house at exactly 1:30. Clara greeted me with a smile that was just a touch too bright, her hand lingering on my arm a fraction too long. "Arthur, so glad you're here. You look wonderful." Nathan appeared, clapping me on the shoulder. "Dad, perfect timing. Let's get you settled, then we can talk before the guests start showing up." But before any talk could begin, Lily came bounding over, her smile genuine and unpracticed, hugging me tightly. I handed her the wrapped art set, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt normal, warm, right. Then I caught Clara watching us, her gaze sharpening for just a second before she turned to greet someone else. Inside, the living room was decked out with streamers and balloons, the kind of elaborate setup Clara never used to bother with for family events. Guests trickled in, laughter filled the spaces between the music. And yet, beneath it all, I could sense the choreography. Clara and Nathan moved in subtle coordination, intercepting certain conversations, steering me towards certain people. I played my part, smiling, making small talk, but nothing escaped my notice. Every glance they exchanged, every hushed word, every orchestrated move. As the afternoon stretched on, the crowd thinned around 5. Nathan caught my eye. "Dad, why don't you stay a little after? We can go over that family stuff we mentioned." Clara chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. "It'll just take a little while. We've been working on something that'll make things easier for you." I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, hiding the fact that by then, my plan was already forming, one that would require impeccable timing, multiple witnesses, and the kind of precision I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. They thought tonight would be the night they took control. They didn't realize it would be the night I started taking it back. By the time the last of Lily's friends had been picked up and the paper plates stacked in the trash, the light outside had turned the color of cooling embers. The party noise had thinned to a low hum, leaving just Nathan, Clara, and me in the living room. I knew this was the moment they'd been engineering all afternoon, the culmination of their careful charade. Nathan glanced towards the door, as if confirming no one else would walk in, then leaned against the arm of the sofa. "Dad," he said, his voice a notch softer than usual, a false tenderness. "Why don't we sit down for a minute? Just us." Clara was already moving towards the dining table, the one spot in their house with no view of the ocean, no distractions. Just a flat surface and plenty of room for papers. I followed, letting my pace be unhurried, my expression the same even calm I'd worn all day. Inside, my mind was cataloging angles, distances, and the slight bulge in Clara's leather tote resting by her chair. She sat opposite me, her posture straight but relaxed, the way a banker does when she's about to close a deal she's certain is already hers. "We've been thinking about the future," she began, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "About making sure you don't have to stress over the little things. Bills, errands, bank trips." Nathan slid into the seat beside her, nodding along like a puppet. "It's about helping you, Dad. We want to take some of that weight off your shoulders." I let my gaze drop to the tote. Clara caught it and, without breaking stride in her well-rehearsed sentence, unzipped the bag and pulled out a slim, sand-colored folder. My stomach recognized the texture before my mind did, heavy stock, the kind used by law offices that like their work to feel permanent. She set it down between us, turning it so it faced me. The top page had a yellow sticky tab marking the signature line. The header, in block capitals, read, "Durable Power of Attorney." Nathan smiled, a wide, unsettling grin, like a man presenting a long-awaited gift. "This just means we can handle things on your behalf. If something comes up, you'd still be in control." This is just backup. That word, just, is one I've heard in too many negotiations. It's the sugar they coat the hook with, the soft touch before the sharp barb. Clara reached into the folder again and pulled out a second document. This one had a title that made my chest tighten. Transfer on death. It's a precaution, she said lightly, as though we were talking about buying an extra umbrella. If something happens, the property goes straight to the family without probate. It's seamless. You'd still live here as long as you want. My fingers rested on the edge of the paper, tracing the watermark without looking down. And you filled these out already? Just the basics, Clara replied, her voice saccharine. Names, addresses. All that's missing is your signature and a notary stamp. Nathan jumped in, his tone too quick, too eager. We can get the stamp in the morning. It's better to do it now, Dad. Tomorrow's Saturday. The banks are open half a day. We can knock it all out and be done. I studied his face. The eagerness there wasn't about helping me. It was about securing something, anything, before the weekend ended. What brought this on so suddenly? I asked, keeping my tone curious, not confrontational. Nathan shifted in his chair, suddenly uncomfortable. We've been talking about it for months, he said, glancing at Clara for affirmation. With the storms last winter, the repairs, you've got a lot to manage here. We just think it's time. Clara leaned in, lowering her voice like she was confiding a secret. We saw what happened to Mrs. Ellison down the street when she had that fall. No paperwork, and her kids had to fight the bank for access to pay her bills. We don't want that for you. It was a good story, plausible, sympathetic, but I'd been in the neighborhood long enough to know Mrs. Ellison's fall was 3 steps off her porch onto her own lawyer's driveway. She'd handled her affairs just fine. I appreciate your concern, I said, and I meant it in the narrowest possible way. Clara slid a pen across the table, the kind that leaves thick, confident ink. If we do this now, we can avoid headaches later. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the hallway, Lily, peeking in, her small hand clutching the doorframe. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and I gave the smallest, most reassuring nod. She stayed put, listening. I picked up the pen, rolling it between my fingers. You've already spoken to someone at the bank? Nathan nodded, too quickly again. We've got the account set up for joint access once this is signed. Makes it easier for us to pay things on your behalf. That was the tell. Joint access was the first step to merging funds, and merging funds was the first step to draining them. And the house? I asked, my voice calm, almost meditative. Clara didn't blink. The deed would just make it simpler to transition things if needed. You'd be listed as the life tenant. You keep living there until... She trailed off, just long enough for the silence to say what she wouldn't. Until you decide otherwise, Nathan finished, too quickly, trying to smooth it over. The pacing of their pitch was tightening. They wanted me to move from question to signature without enough space to think, which told me they were worried I might think. I set the pen down. I don't sign anything without reading every line. Clara's smile was thin, a practiced expression that didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Take your time. She pushed the folder a few inches closer. I opened it, scanning the text slowly. It was all there. The sweeping language about acting in my best interest, the clauses that allowed for property sales, and the absence of any requirement for my approval on transactions. Under a certain amount, and in the deed, the quiet clause that let them refinance to preserve value, without my explicit consent. This is thorough, I said, looking up. We wanted to cover all bases, Nathan replied, trying to sound helpful. We're just looking out for you. I closed the folder gently. Then you won't mind if I have my attorney review it. Nathan's face fell, a flicker of raw panic. That's not necessary. We already had someone review it. Then it should stand up to a second opinion, I said evenly. Nathan's jaw shifted, just enough to show the first, clear crack in his confidence. Dad, we're trying to help. And I'm trying to make sure we all sleep well tonight, I replied. The air in the room had changed, gone sharp and cold. Clara reached for the pen again, but I slid it back toward her. Tomorrow, I said. 10 a.m. With witnesses. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Clara leaned back, feigning ease. All right, tomorrow. Nathan forced a smile, but his eyes were elsewhere, calculating what this delay might cost him. I stood, letting the chair leg scrape just enough to mark the end of the conversation. I'll see myself out, I said, and walked toward the door. As I passed the hallway, barely a whisper, I murmured, better than they think. Outside, the evening air smelled of salt and cedar again, but now it carried the weight of what had been set in motion. They thought they'd almost won. They didn't realize they'd just given me every single piece I needed to dismantle their plan on my terms. I left Nathan's house with the folder's weight still in my hands, light as paper, heavy as intent. The road home ran along the dark line where the ocean keeps its own counsel, a deep, silent knowing. By the time my porch light swung into view, the night had quieted into that particular stillness our coast knows. Not silence, but a low, steady breath that makes a man hear his own steps. I unlocked the door, set the folder on the oak table, and clicked on the kitchen lamp. The cone of warm light made the papers look ordinary again, as if a signature could ever be ordinary. There are nights when you sleep, and there are nights when you build. Tonight, I built. I pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer, wrote the time at the top, 8:41 p.m., and started a list with the calm precision of a man measuring rafters. 1. Witnesses. 2. Counsel. 3. Proof of pattern. 4. Layout of the room. 5. My voice. I don't raise it. I use it. I took my phone and typed slowly, deliberately, so there'd be no mistakes. To Margaret, need you here tomorrow at 10 a.m. with your niece who has the notary stamp. Quiet matter. Please reply yes if you can. To Sam Whitaker, Sam, urgent. POA and deed shoved at me tonight. Need your eyes and your presence. 10 a.m. tomorrow at my place. I'll have coffee. Bring your calm. The screen glowed in my palm as the messages sailed out into the night. Within a minute, Margaret's 3 dots pulsed. Then her answer, yes, we'll be there. No questions. Sam took longer. He always did, not because he was slow, but because he read twice before he sent once. I'll be there. Do not sign a thing. Bring nothing to them. Let them bring it to you. My mouth tightened into what might have passed for a smile on a younger man. I set the phone beside the folder and opened the front flap. Durable power of attorney. Transfer on death deed. A third sheet, one I hadn't clocked at the table, slipped forward. A third-party authorization for my insurer, granting full policy inquiry and modification access. Clara had thought of the utilities, the little details I never think about until a storm knocks them down. Good. The better the trap they built, the cleaner it would look when it snapped back on them. Pacing matters when you're up against people who want to rush you. So, I slowed the room. I made a fresh pot of coffee that I wouldn't finish. I rinsed the same mug twice. I moved through the house and did what I always do when I need to steady myself. I listened to how the wood was holding. No complaints. This home still liked me in it. I took the old metal lockbox from the office closet, set it on the table, and turned the key. Inside, the ledger I'd begun the day I saw Clara at the bank with Nathan, entries in dark ink marching back a year. I read the list of help I'd given my son. $1,200 for car repair, $3,850 for gym equipment, $2,100 for tuition bridge, $7,500 for quarterly taxes, $950 for home insurance gap, $2,400 for HVAC call. And on. 74 line items with dates and notes, each one justified at the time by a reason that felt warmer than a contract. A pattern looks like love when you're inside it. From a distance, with a yellow lamp and a legal pad, it looks like training. I laid the ledger open to the last page, slid a copy of last year's property tax receipts beside it, and placed the deed to the house on top. The papers smelled faintly of that old chalky tang that only county records have. Proof of pattern, check. I added a small audio recorder to the pile, cheap, discreet, a thing I used to keep notes when I was consulting and my hands were too dusty for a pen. I didn't need a secret recording to win. I needed it to remember. People tell the truth differently when they think time's on their side. I wrote another line on the pad, seat them across from the light. Me with my back to the window. Witnesses near the door. The layout matters. If Nathan tried to position me where the pen would find my hand by force of habit, I wanted the room to make that habit think twice. I pulled Evelyn's picture off the safe and turned the dial. November 23rd, 79. Our wedding date. The metal door slid open. Inside, originals of everything that makes a life a shape officials will recognize. Birth certificates, marriage license, discharge papers from an old knee surgery, and the will I'd written 3 months after she died. Because I couldn't stand how unknown tomorrow had suddenly become. I laid the will next to the deed, my eyes on the clause that left Nathan the house if I went first, with a simple rider for Lily's education. I touched the page where Evelyn's name sat and said out loud, because this house has heard all the important things I've ever said, I kept my promise. I just didn't see how fast he'd sell his. The old anger, the kind that wants to be heat, pressed at my ribs. I let it come and let it pass. Rage is persuasive. At midnight, in the morning, it forgets its lines. I needed lines I could keep. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the hallway where we hang our years. Nathan in a baseball uniform, big as a sail. Evelyn in a red raincoat, laughing into the weather. Lily with paint on her nose, holding up a sloppy heron like she'd discovered a new species. Heron doesn't mind standing still, she'd written in a note. I took that tonight as permission. My phone buzzed. Margaret again. Niece can notarize immediately at 10. Shall bring a journal. Do you need anything else? I typed, a steady presence, and left it at that. Then I called the number I'd written on the pad last winter, but never thought I'd use. The direct line of a branch VP I'd done a pro bono accessibility design for years ago. Arthur Bennett, I said when he answered, I need you tomorrow, not as a banker, but as a man who understands what these words mean. He listened as I read only headers, nothing more. POA, TD deed, insurer authorization. Then he said the thing I needed most. Don't get clever tonight. Get thorough. If it's legitimate, it. With a calm that was all intention. Shall we begin? She asked. Let's, I said, and rested my palm lightly on the owl, still be legitimate with witnesses. If it isn't, witnesses will teach it to behave. I thanked him and hung up. My watch said 1 a.m. The recorder sat on the table, small and patient. The house clock ticked like a metronome. You could rest your heartbeat on it. The folder contained a stapled sheet I hadn't seen yet, Care Transition Plan Draft. Clara wasn't aiming just to manage my bills. She wanted a narrative in print that could be attached to anything they might file. Noted increased confusion. Observed difficulty operating vehicle at dusk. Repeated misplacement of items, keys, phone. I read the lies they intended to tell and felt the familiar seesaw of grief and clarity tilt sharply toward the latter. Images surfaced, Clara placing an assisted living brochure under my sugar tin, Nathan mentioning joint accounts as if friction-free meant safe. It all slotted into the backbone of what this was, not a one-night grab, but a long, calculated campaign. I wrote 3 sentences on the pad, the way I used to draft keynotes for project presentations when clients were nervous and budgets were tense. 1. I am competent. 2. I have a pattern of financial support for my son. 3. I am altering my estate to protect my granddaughter. I underlined the last twice and let the pencil rest. Then I rehearsed the morning in my head, beat by beat, until it read like a plan a carpenter could follow. Margaret and her niece at 9:50. Sam at 9:58. Coffee poured and cooling to a temperature that says, welcome, not performance. Nathan and Clara at 10 sharp, with their bright smiles and their pen. I placed the chairs exactly where they needed to be, set the folder on the mantel where the first light would hit it, and left my ledger open so there would be no drama about me producing documents from a drawer. I wanted what would happen to look inevitable to anyone who'd never met us. I turned the porch light off, then on again, an old superstition of mine from the days I'd leave early and come home late, a way of telling the house I'd be back. I walked the perimeter, back door latched, office door open, picture over the safe straight. People imagine the night before a confrontation is a drum roll. Sometimes, it's a man checking hinges. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed one last number, Lily's cheap little smartwatch, the one with the cartoon face that winks between minutes. She answered in a whisper from her room. Grandpa, I'm home. I said, everything is set for tomorrow. There will be some adults here who are very good at making sure things are done right. You did your part. Now you sleep. She was quiet long enough to make me think the line had dropped. Then, do you still love Mom and Dad? Children know where the live wires are. I love them, I said. I don't love what they're trying to do. Will they be mad at me? They won't know, I said. And if they ever do, I'll be between you and that anger. She exhaled, that little shaky breath I'd felt on my wrist this afternoon, and said, okay. Good night. Good night, Heron, I said, and hung up, feeling the house around me settle. Sleep didn't come in a sheet. It came in strips. I let it. Each time I woke, the plan was still there, sitting comfortably in the chair by the window like an old friend who knows why you've called. At 5:47 a.m., the sky started turning the color that makes fishermen check the tide. I swung my legs over the side of the bed before the alarm. The morning smelled like wet cedar and coffee grounds. I shaved because it steadies my hands. I put on the blue shirt Evelyn liked because she said it made my stubborn look like resolve. At 9:15, I reread the POA language and circled 3 phrases in pencil: best interest, reasonable access, and emergency determination. Those words are the trapdoors. At 9:30, I walked the path to the mailbox and back, so my body would remember the distance between my front door and a line I wouldn't cross. At 9:44, Margaret's car pulled in, gravel crunching softly like a respectful knock. She stepped out with a thermos and the kind of hug people give when they're here to work, not gossip. Her niece Jenna followed, mid-30s, neat, carrying a journal and the small stamp that transforms ink into record. Morning, Margaret said. You look like you built a bridge last night. Just set the forms, I said. Sam's 2 minutes out, she said, glancing at her phone. We arranged the chairs exactly as I'd drawn them, me, with the light at my back, witnesses where the door opens, 2 empty chairs across the table, waiting for the pitch. Jenna opened her notary journal with a soft crack and set out a pen that looked ordinary on purpose. Coffee? I offered. Strong, Margaret said. Always, Jenna added. At 9:58, Sam stepped in, raincoat half-zipped, eyes already taking inventory. He shook my hand without small talk and scanned the folder from a respectful distance, the way a surgeon looks at an x-ray before asking how the patient feels. We'll let them lay it out, he said quietly. And you'll ask your one line. Which line? I asked, even though I knew. The line that builds the record. Is there anything here that transfers control of my property without my express consent? And if they say no, then you hand them the phrase they forgot. They wrote, he said, tapping the pencil circle on emergency determination. If they say yes, Jenna writes that sentence down by hand in her journal, and we all sign under it like it's Sunday. I breathed once through my nose. And if they had a doctor lined up for a competency screening? Sam's mouth made a shape that wasn't a smile. I'll enjoy that part. The clock ticked to 10 a.m. Pacing is a language in itself. I left the door open and let the house show them it had nothing to hide. A car door slammed. Then another. Voices, the controlled cheerfulness of people who've convinced themselves they're doing the right thing because they're calling it that. Clara's perfume walked in 2 seconds before she did. Nathan followed, his face set to pleasant, his eyes finding mine with manufactured warmth. He saw Sam first, then Margaret, then Jenna's journal, and I watched the math in his expression rework itself, the calculation shifting rapidly. Clara didn't falter. She smiled like this was better than she'd hoped. Oh, she said, you invited help. You brought help, I said evenly, gesturing to the folder under her arm. I thought it was fair, Nathan. His gaze slid to Sam. We didn't think we'd need lawyers for family. I'm a friend, Sam said, and family is where people deserve the best paperwork. Clara sat, placed the folder down, squared it with the table edge, and met my eyes AK. The house under my hand. The game they thought they were hosting had moved. They just hadn't felt the floor tilt. Yet? Nathan sat down across from me, his palms flat on the table, as if planting himself there would anchor the moment. Clara placed the folder between us like a gift she'd spent weeks wrapping, the edges neat, the clasp fastened. Jenna's pen rested in her hand, ready, and Margaret had taken on the stillness of someone who's already reading the room. Sam leaned back, his arms loose, but his gaze fixed, the kind of presence that says, I've been here before and I know how this ends. When someone sets a stage for you, make sure you control the lighting. I reached forward, but not to the folder. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let the silence settle until it pressed against Clara's composure. She was the first to break. Arthur, she began, her voice syrupy sweet, this is really about making things easier for you. Nathan and I have been talking about how much you do on your own bills, upkeep, decisions about the house. We just want to make sure you're not burdened. I nodded slightly, as though she'd just told me the weather. Consider it, I said. But I'm curious what that looks like in writing. Nathan opened the folder with the casualness of a man showing vacation photos, not legal documents. He slid the top sheet toward me. This is a power of attorney, durable, so it stays in effect. If, God forbid, you ever can't make decisions yourself, it just means I can step in and handle things. Handle things, I repeated, glancing at Sam. His eyes flicked once to Jenna, who lowered her pen to the journal without writing. Clara leaned forward. It's standard, Arthur. You'd still have full control over everything while you're well. This is just insurance. Insurance, I said softly. I let my finger rest on the heading. Durable power of attorney. Then I asked, my voice calm but clear, is there anything in here that transfers control of my property without my express consent? Nathan hesitated a fraction of a second, but in a room where everyone's waiting for that beat, it's enough. No, he said, too quickly. Sam reached across, flipped to the second page without looking at me. Then explain this, he said, tapping the paragraph I'd circled last night. Emergency determination. That clause lets you act immediately if you believe there's an emergency, even if Arthur hasn't agreed. That's not insurance, Clara. That's access. Clara's mouth tightened, the first clear crack in her smile. It's precautionary. If you fell ill, we'd call an ambulance, I said, cutting in, not a bank. The pacing in moments like this is a kind of tide. You let it roll in, then pull it back sharp. I picked up the next document, transfer on death. Nathan started to speak, but I held up a hand. This one, I said, changes the title of the house the minute I die. No probate, straight to you. That's efficient. It saves legal fees. Clara said, still trying to project an air of helpfulness. It's what any good advisor would suggest. I had a good advisor, I said. She wore a red raincoat and laughed at bad weather. She didn't add riders without consent. Nathan shifted in his chair, suddenly uncomfortable. Dad, we're just trying to protect the family. Protect, I said, by pre-signing the deed? By drafting a care transition plan that says I'm confused at dusk, that I misplaced my keys. His eyes widened, not because I was wrong, but because I'd read it. Margaret leaned forward slightly, as if to catch every word. Clara's voice sharpened. We notice things, Arthur. We're worried. That's all. Worried enough, Sam said evenly, to file for conservatorship before the next quarter. The twist landed where I needed it to, not loud, not dramatic, but like the click of a lock. Jenna's pen moved, the sound of it scratching into the journal, making it official. Clara glanced at the notary seal beside her. You brought a notary. You brought a pen, I said. I figured we might as well make it official either way. Nathan leaned back, exhaling hard, defeated. This is ridiculous. We're family. And family, I said, is where people deserve the best paperwork. The transition came when I slid my folder across the table, ledger open, receipts visible, the will resting on top. Here's my pattern of support to you, Nathan. 74 documented instances over the last year alone, all without a single clause, without witnesses, without a demand for your signature. If you think I'm incapable of handling my affairs, you'll have to explain why I was capable enough to finance yours. The room went still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Clara looked at the ledger, then at Nathan, calculating the next move. We just don't want you to be taken advantage of, she said, finally. Too late, I replied. That's been happening for a while. The difference is, now we have witnesses. Margaret shifted, a quiet show of solidarity, while Jenna's pen moved again, recording every word. Sam broke the pause. Arthur, do you consent to signing any of the documents today? No, I said. Do you wish to make any statement about your capacity to manage your affairs? Yes, I am competent. I have a documented history of financial support for my son, and I am altering my estate to protect my granddaughter. Jenna wrote each sentence exactly, then turned the journal for me to sign my name. Ink on paper felt like setting the last stone in a foundation. Nathan's voice dropped low, but in the quiet, everyone heard it. You're making a mistake, Dad. Maybe, I said, but it'll be mine to make. The pacing eased as I stood, gathering my folder. We're done here. Clara rose, her perfume now too sweet, and met my eyes. You'll regret this. Not as much as you will, I said, letting the words land without raising my voice. As they walked out, Nathan didn't look back. Clara did, once, and what she saw was a table with nothing left on it but a coffee cup, cooling in the light. The door shut and the house seemed to exhale. I thanked Margaret, Jenna, and Sam. You didn't need us, Sam said. But you were smart enough to want us here. Jenna packed her stamp. Margaret squeezed my shoulder, and by the time their cars pulled away, the only sound left was the ocean's steady breath. I stood in the hallway where we hung our years and looked at Lily's heron drawing again. Heron doesn't mind standing still. Sometimes, standing still is just the pause before the next step. That step was coming. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet it had been the night before. Last night, it had been anticipation, like the air before a storm. Now, it was aftermath. Heavy, deliberate, the kind of silence that follows when something has shifted just enough that it can't shift back. I stood in the kitchen, fingers on the edge of the oak table, feeling the faint ridges worn into the grain from decades of coffee mugs and Sunday crosswords. Winning a single round doesn't end the game. It only changes the rules. My phone buzzed once on the counter. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Another buzz, this time a text. You've embarrassed us. We'll talk later. Nathan. No punctuation, no warmth. I read it twice, then deleted it without replying. If he thought I'd be baited into another exchange so soon, he didn't understand me as well as he thought. I poured a fresh cup of coffee, not because I needed it, but because it gave my hands something to do while my mind worked. The taste was more bitter than I'd made it yesterday. Maybe I'd let it brew too long, or maybe I was just noticing more. The pacing had to stay steady now. Too fast, and I'd act on emotion. Too slow, and they'd regroup. I opened the ledger again, flipping back to the earliest entries. There was a story in those numbers, and I needed it ready to tell to anyone who might listen, a story about a father who'd never refused a request, until the day the requests turned into demands. Nathan and Clara thought they could push me into signing over control in my living room. They didn't. And now, I just turned their paperwork into evidence. I called Sam. They'll come back, I said. Of course they will, he replied. What's your next step? I want a record in more than one place. County recorder's office, bank, and my attorney's safe. If they're going to try again, I want to make it so they have to file their intentions in the light of day. Then we'll do it, Sam said. Tomorrow morning, I'll drive. I hung up, set my coffee down, and went to the office. The old metal file drawers slid open with their familiar groan. Inside was every major document I'd kept for 40 years, tax returns, contracts, even the warranty for a refrigerator I no longer owned. I pulled out the thick folder labeled House and laid it on the desk, the deed, the receipts for every repair and improvement since Evelyn and I bought it, even the letter from the Historical Society about its 1927 craftsman status. All of it would be harder to argue against than my voice alone. While the printer hummed, making fresh copies, I thought of Lily. The last thing I wanted was for her to get caught in the crossfire of this, but she'd already been pulled in, whispering her warning to me at the party, her little voice shaking but steady. That meant she understood more than any child should have to. I would have to shield her from the next part. I drove into town just after lunch. Main Street was half empty, the way it always was on a weekday after tourist season ended. First stop was the bank. Arthur Bennett, the branch VP, was waiting by his side office, already holding a folder. I've got the account protections in place, he said. Any withdrawals over 1,000 will require your physical signature and matching ID. No exceptions. And the house? I asked. We'll flag any title inquiries as high priority. If someone tries to transfer without you, it'll hit my desk first. We sat down, went through the POA Nathan had brought, and Arthur pointed out 3 more clauses that could have been twisted into immediate access. They probably didn't expect you to read this closely, he said. They expected me to trust them, I replied. And that's on me. The next stop was the county recorder's office. The woman behind the counter recognized me from the accessibility project I'd volunteered on years back. Arthur, she said, what brings you here? I need to make sure my title stays exactly where it is, I told her. She nodded, pulled up the records, and set a monitoring flag so I'd get an alert for any activity. You'd be surprised how often family tries to streamline things, she said quietly. I wouldn't, I said, and she gave me a look that said she understood more than she was saying. The transition back home came in the form of rain light at first, then harder, drumming against the roof like a metronome for my thoughts. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot they tried to corner me in, and made a new list, not just of protections, but of actions. 1. Secure finances. 2. Protect the deed. 3. Adjust the will. Make my intentions clear to the right people. That last one mattered most. I called my attorney, a man named Fletcher, who'd drawn up my will after Evelyn died. I want to update it, I told him. And I want a clause that makes any attempt to challenge it grounds for disinheritance. That's enforceable, he said. And you're sure you want it? I'm sure, I said. And I want a trust for Lily, ironclad, unreachable by her parents until she's of age. Fletcher didn't ask for details. He knew better than to dig where the client was already certain. We set an appointment for Friday morning. That gave me 2 days to gather every piece of proof and make it airtight. Evening came early under the rain clouds. I made a simple dinner, roast chicken, green beans, the kind of meal Evelyn used to make when we needed something steady. Halfway through eating, my phone lit up with Clara's name. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. Her voice was sharp, the syrup gone. Arthur, this is getting out of hand. Nathan and I were trying to help you. If you insist on involving outsiders, you're going to make this ugly. Think about Lily. Call me back. I played it twice, then saved it. If she wanted to bring Lily into this, I'd keep every word she said about her. The pacing shifted as I moved into preparation mode. I took photos of every document, stored them on 2 separate flash drives, one in the safe, the other in the glove box of my truck. I drafted a simple statement, just a paragraph, about my capacity, my decisions, and my intentions, and had Margaret agree to witness it in the morning. Before bed, I called Lily. Did they talk to you today? I asked. No, she said. Mom was mad, but she didn't say why. Good, I said. If she does, you don't have to answer. Just tell her you don't know anything. Okay, Grandpa. Yeah. Are you mad at me? That question again, and it landed the same way, low in the chest, where truth sits. Never, I said. You did the right thing. She was quiet, then said, Heron doesn't mind standing still. That's right, I said. Sometimes, stillness is strong. The next morning, before I could even finish my coffee, a white envelope was shoved through the mail slot. No stamp, just my name written in Nathan's quick, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. We've arranged for Dr. Kelman to visit tomorrow at 2 p.m. for an evaluation. Please be home. No signature, no explanation, just the next move in their game. I read it once, then set it down beside my coffee. They wanted a competency exam on their terms with their doctor. Fine. I'd been expecting that. I dialed Fletcher. Change of plan, I told him. Can you be here tomorrow at 1:30 and bring someone who can run a legitimate capacity assessment? Someone they can't accuse of bias. He chuckled. Already have the name. I'll call her today. The rain eased by afternoon, and I walked the perimeter of the house again. The back gate latch was loose, so I fixed it. The front steps needed sweeping, so I did that too. Not because it mattered to the plan, but because it mattered to me. This was still my home, and I intended to keep it that way. By evening, I felt the shape of what was coming. They'd arrive with their doctor, expecting to steer the conversation toward confusion and frailty. They'd find a room arranged for truth, witnesses in place, and a man who'd already decided the outcome. The game was still on, only now it was on my board. The morning they chose to test my mind broke colder than it should have for late September. The kind of cold that makes the air taste metallic when you step outside. If someone invites a storm to your doorstep, you decide where the lightning hits. I stood at the kitchen counter, watching the steam rise from my coffee, not because I needed the warmth, but because the mug felt steady in my hands. Steadiness was the thing they were coming to question. At 8 a.m., Fletcher called. Arthur, I've confirmed Dr. Harrington for this afternoon. Board certified in geriatric medicine, published on capacity evaluations, and allergic to cutting corners. She'll be there at 1:30. Good, I said. They're expecting Dr. Kelman. Fletcher let a small smile into his voice. Then they'll be pleasantly disappointed. The pacing had to be deliberate today. No rushing, no last-minute adjustments that looked like scrambling. Every move needed to feel inevitable, like I'd been ready for this all along. I set the oak table again, same placement as before, my chair with the light at my back, 2 empty chairs across, witnesses near the door. Margaret and Jenna would be here by 1:15, Sam by 1:20. The folder of documents sat closed in the center, not to be touched until I decided. At 10 o'clock, I walked the perimeter of the property one more time. The cedars smelled sharper in the cold, and the gravel path under my boots sounded louder than usual. I checked the mailbox, knowing nothing important would be there, but the small act of opening and closing it made me think of all the years Evelyn had done the same. This house wasn't just mine. It was the record of a life built in lines. And I wasn't about to let anyone redraw it without my hand on the pencil. My phone lit up. Clara. I answered this time. Arthur, she said, her voice bright in a way that meant it wasn't real. Just wanted to make sure you remember Dr. Kelman is coming at 2 o'clock. I remember you arranged that, I said, and I've arranged something else. Silence. Then, what does that mean? It means the evaluation will be thorough, documented, and witnessed for everyone's protection. Her tone sharpened. You don't trust us. I trust the process, I said, and ended the call. I could almost feel her pressing the phone to her ear afterward, trying to decide if she'd miscalculated. At 1:15, Margaret's car pulled up. She stepped inside with her steady presence, setting her thermos down on the sideboard. Jenna followed, journal in hand, her expression as unreadable as a locked drawer. Are we ready? Margaret asked. Ready, I said. At 1:20, Sam arrived, coat collar turned up against the wind. He scanned the room, nodded once. Layout's perfect, he said. Let them bring the weather. They'll find the grounds already dry. The transition into the moment came with the sound of tires on gravel. At 1:58, 2 car doors, then voices. Clara's heels struck the porch first, Nathan behind her, and between them, a man I assumed was Dr. Kelman, tall, mid-50s, carrying a leather briefcase and an expression that said he'd already decided the conclusion. But before they could cross the threshold, a silver sedan rolled up behind them. Fletcher stepped out, followed by a woman in a navy coat with a doctor's bag. Her posture was clean and straight, someone who didn't mind being measured. This is Dr. Harrington, Fletcher said as they approached the door. Nathan's smile faltered. We already have a doctor, he said. So do I replied. And since it's my capacity being evaluated, both will be present. That way there's no dispute. Kelman's eyes narrowed, but he stepped inside without comment. Harrington followed, setting her bag neatly by the chair next to mine. Clara's voice was sugar over steel. Arthur, this feels unnecessary. Then it shouldn't be a problem, I said. To the chairs. We begin. Kelman launched into his questions quickly. Name, date, current events, the kind of surface-level prompts you'd expect. I answered each with the calm of a man naming tools in a shed. Then Harrington took her turn, moving deeper. Financial decisions I'd made in the past year, reasons behind them, hypothetical scenarios about property and consent. Each answer came with details, names, dates, dollar amounts, pulled straight from the ledger in my head. Nathan shifted in his seat. Clara crossed her legs the other way. Half an hour in, Harrington closed her notebook. Mr. Bennett, in my professional opinion, you are fully capable of managing your affairs. I see no cognitive impairment that would warrant a transfer of control. Kelman cleared his throat. I'd like to reserve my judgment, of course. As you should, Harrington said, but we'll be filing a joint report, and mine will include the presence of witnesses and notarized documentation of today's proceedings. That was the lightning. It hit square, and they both felt it. Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. Clara's smile had evaporated. The pacing shifted to the conclusion. I slid the folder toward them. You can take your documents back. I won't be signing anything today or any other day unless it's on my terms and my time, with my counsel present. Nathan's jaw tightened. We were trying to help you, he said. Help looks different when it comes with a pen in your hand and a clock on the table, I replied. And if you're worried about Lily, I've made provisions for her that don't require you to. The sting landed. I could see it in Clara's eyes, calculating, adjusting, realizing the window was closing. Fletcher stood, buttoning his coat. This concludes our business for today. Any further discussions will go through my office. As they left, Harrington gave me a small nod, the kind professionals give when they've seen a fight without having to throw a punch. The door shut behind them, and the house exhaled. I sat back down at the oak table, running my hand over the grain. Today wasn't the end, but it was the moment the ground stopped shifting under my feet. And in this kind of game, that's the first step toward winning. They left my driveway in 2 cars, one right after the other, but the gravel dust hung in the air as if reluctant to follow them. I stayed seated at the oak table long enough to hear the kettle click off in the kitchen. No rush. In war, whether it's fought with ink or with iron, what you do in the moments after a battle matters as much as the battle itself. I poured the tea and let it cool. The house had gone quiet, but not the quiet you can trust. This was the quiet after an animal slinks into the brush. You can't see it anymore, but you know it's still there, circling. By 4:30, Fletcher had gone, Harrington had gone, and even Margaret had reluctantly stepped back across the yard to her place. I walked her to the gate. "They'll try again," she said. "Yes," I replied, "but next time they'll be rushing, and rushing people leave fingerprints." She gave me that slow nod she reserves for hard truths, then turned toward home. Inside, I gathered the paperwork Kelman had brought and slid it into a plain manila envelope. It wasn't evidence in a courtroom sense, not yet. But it was a record, and records have a way of outlasting lies. I put the envelope in the drawer where Evelyn once kept birthday cards, a place Nathan and Clara would never think to look because it held nothing of financial value. That was the first layer of my counterattack, make them underestimate where their real value was. At 6 p.m., the phone rang, not the house line, but my cell. Lily's name lit up the screen. "Grandpa, they're mad," she whispered before I could even say hello. Mom slammed the cupboard door, and Dad told her to keep her voice down, but I heard him say something about finding another angle. My grip tightened on the phone. "You did the right thing calling me. You're all right." "Yeah, but Grandpa," her voice shrank a little. "Are they going to take the house anyway?" I took a slow breath. "Not if I can help it, Lily. And I can help it." I hung up and sat there, letting her words echo. Another angle could mean anything, but I'd been around long enough to know it usually meant something you hadn't thought of yet, or worse, something you had, but hoped they wouldn't try. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the halls, touching the frames on the walls, Nathan at 9 in his Little League cap, Evelyn holding a kite at the coast, Lily painting at the kitchen table. Every photo was a record of time that couldn't be repossessed, but the house they hung in? That was different. The next morning, I called Sam. "They're regrouping," I said. "Good," he answered. "Means off balance." He suggested we meet in town over black coffee at Miller's Diner. We laid it out. I'd need to shore up the property lines, literally and legally, before any fresh move from their side. "Boundary survey," Sam said. "Get it filed. If they try to claim any confusion about what is yours, the county records will shut that down before it starts." By noon, I was at the surveyor's office. He shook my hand and said he could have the work done by Friday. "You expecting trouble?" he asked. "Just making sure the foundation's level," I replied, and he chuckled. But I wasn't joking. I was locking the side door when headlights swept across the wall. Not Nathan's truck, too low. Clara's SUV. She didn't knock. She came around back, heels clicking on the stone path. "Arthur," she said, her voice sweet as a spoonful of syrup, hiding the taste of medicine. "We should talk. Without all the extras. No lawyers, no witnesses." I leaned against the doorframe. "If you think that will make me more agreeable, you've misread me." She stepped closer. "You've put yourself in a corner. We could have handled this quietly, but now." She stopped herself, glancing toward the fence where the neighbor's light had just flicked on. "What now?" I asked. She straightened. "Now you can either sign a voluntary transfer of interest or watch Nathan go through probate while you're still alive." My jaw tightened. "You've been doing your homework, but so have I." I opened the door just enough for her to see the manila envelope sitting on the counter. "Every word, every signature you've tried to push on me? Logged. And if I ever have to, that goes to the sheriff before sundown." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't." I smiled faintly. "You don't know me as well as you think." She left without another word, but her heels struck the stones harder than before, the sound of someone walking away with less than they came for. Over the next 2 days, I moved quietly. I called an old friend in insurance to review my homeowner's policy and made sure all contact information bypassed Nathan entirely. I updated my will to make Lily's trust airtight with Margaret as co-trustee. And then, because counterattacks work best when they arrive from a direction no one's watching, I paid a visit to the county treasurer's office. There, it's a little-known process called a life estate with retained powers. It meant I could still live in the house, still control it, but the remainder man, my chosen successor, would be locked in. I chose Lily. When I walked out of that office with the files stamped and sealed, the October wind cut across my face sharper than I expected. It didn't matter. The foundation was set now. If Nathan and Clara wanted to move me, they'd be dragging chains they didn't even know I'd wrapped around the place. That Friday, the surveyor's report came in. Rix met me at the property line with the papers. "No disputes. Boundaries are clean. You're rock solid here." I shook his hand and thought, not for the first time, how much of survival is just getting the right people on your side before you need them. Saturday morning, Lily came over again, paint on her hands. "I drew something," she said, handing me a sheet. It was our house again, but this time the fence was taller, the gate closed, and she'd drawn herself inside, waving above it, in her careful block letters, "Safe." I tacked it to the corkboard by the kitchen door. "That's exactly right," I told her. Because now, it was. Nathan's voice was already different when they came back 2 days later. Shorter words, clipped edges, the tone of a man who'd stopped pretending this was still a family conversation. Clara didn't waste the sweetness this time. She came in first, heels striking the kitchen tile like she owned the rhythm of the house. Margaret and Sam were already seated, as agreed, a silent wall of witnesses, and Jenna sat in the corner, notary journal closed but ready. I had left the manila folder right where it had been on the mantel, in plain view. Let them see I wasn't hiding anything. The truth doesn't need to be hidden. They didn't sit. Nathan paced behind Clara like an impatient prosecutor. Clara kept both palms on the back of a chair, as if she were addressing a jury. Arthur, she began, voice low, we've tried to make this easy. I let my eyes rest on her but said nothing. She looked to Nathan, and that's when I felt the shift in the air. He stepped forward, hands in his pockets, gaze hard. We didn't want to do this, he said. We were hoping you'd see reason, but it's about Lily. Her name hit harder than I expected. A tightness gripped my chest, not the kind that sends you reaching for medicine, but the kind that locks your breath in place. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something coiled. Clara's eyes sharpened. She thought she'd found the weak seam. If you don't sign the transfer and the power of attorney, she said, there won't be money for her tuition next term. You know how expensive it is. We can't carry that ourselves without freeing up your assets. Margaret stiffened beside me, but I didn't move. I let the words sink in, testing them the way you test a beam for cracks. Clara didn't stop there. And we can't have her in the middle of this tension. It's not healthy. So, until things are sorted, we think. You shouldn't see her, Nathan added quickly. It's temporary. But if you keep fighting, it might have to be permanent. I let silence do its work. Inside, a reel of Lily unspooled. Her in the backyard just last month, sleeves pushed up, dabbing green paint onto a heron's wing, her voice explaining how the heron doesn't mind standing still, the way she looked up at me then. As if I was the only one who would understand what she meant. Now they were using that same child as a poker chip. Part of me wanted to cave, to sign whatever they wanted if it meant I'd see her this weekend, hear her chatter about colors and brush strokes. But another part, the one forged in harder years, knew that giving in now would just teach them the tactic worked. Next time, they'd push further. You're saying, I said evenly, that if I don't sign away my home and my rights, I won't see my granddaughter? Nathan didn't flinch. We're saying Lily's well-being comes first. Then why, I asked, does this sound like ransom instead of care? Clara leaned in slightly. You can be part of what's best for her, Arthur, if you trust us to handle things. Sam's fingers tapped once on the table, a sound only I seemed to notice, our agreed signal for keep steady. I thought of the last time Lily was here, the paint on her hands, the way she laughed when the wind nearly carried her sketchbook across the yard. Her eyes clear, unguarded, looked at me like I was still the person who could make her world safe. If I folded now, I'd keep her for a weekend, maybe two, but long-term, I'd be signing away the very ground under her feet. You know, I said, Lily told me she wanted to bring her art project over. A heron, I think. Clara's smile thinned. She can still show you. Just not until this is settled. The fridge hummed in the background. Jenna shifted her pen in her hand. That, I said, isn't love. That's leverage. Nathan's jaw tightened. Call it what you want. I stood, slow enough that the chair's legs scraped softly over the oak floor. I want you to say it again, I told him. The part where I won't see Lily if I don't sign. He hesitated. Clara cut in. You heard us. I did, I said, nodding toward Jenna. And so did our witness, who will note it down before the day is over. Clara's eyes flickered just a fraction, but enough to tell me the move had landed. Dad, Nathan said. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not making it harder, I replied. I'm making it clear. I reached for the folder on the mantel, placed it in the center of the table. You can take this, I said, but I'm not signing. Not today, not ever. Not when my granddaughter is part of the bargaining. Nathan's voice hardened. Then you're the one keeping her from you. If that helps you sleep, I said, then hold on to it. The room felt heavy, the kind of air that comes before a storm. Margaret's knuckles were white around her thermos. Sam's gaze stayed locked on Nathan. Clara finally sat, arms crossed, voice cold. We'll take other steps. You can't block us forever. Forever's not the point, I said. Today is. And today you told me everything I need to know about how far you'll go. Jenna opened her journal and began to write. Nathan grabbed the folder without opening it, slid it under his arm like something stolen. At the door, he turned. You brought this on yourself. No, I said, you brought Lily into it. The door shut. Engine started. I stayed standing until their cars were gone. Margaret exhaled. That was ugly. It was honest, I said. Sam leaned back. They're not done. That was a shot across the bow. Next time will be formal. Let them, I replied. They've played their strongest card. Now I'll play mine. I picked up my yellow pad and wrote 3 words in block letters. Guardianship. Custody. Contempt. The heron, I thought, doesn't mind standing still, especially when the tide's about to turn. They didn't wait long to make good on their threat. 3 days after they'd sat in my kitchen and dangled Lily like a bargaining chip, I drove into town with a bag of Lily's favorite oatmeal cookies. The plan was simple: drop them off, maybe catch her at the door if she was home. When I pulled into their driveway, the curtains in the front window shifted, then nothing. I knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. The bag felt heavier in my hand than it should have. I left it on the porch and drove away. The next day, I called Nathan. Straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. I'd learned by now that those never got returned. 2 more calls over the next week ended the same way. Clara didn't pick up either. By the second week, I decided to catch Lily at school. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I needed to see for myself that she was okay. I parked across the street from the playground just before dismissal. Kids spilled out in clusters, backpacks swinging, voices carrying. I spotted her hair in a messy braid, pink jacket zipped to the chin. She was laughing with another girl, eyes bright, the same brightness I'd always known. I stepped out of the truck and raised a hand. She saw me. For a second, her face lit up even more. Then Clara's SUV pulled up, blocking my view. Clara leaned across the passenger seat. The door swung open, and Lily climbed in without a wave. The SUV pulled away before I could take another step. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the heron drawing she'd made last month. I traced the lines of the wings with my finger, wondering if she even knew why I'd disappeared from her weekends, wondering what Clara had told her. The ache in my chest was something I hadn't felt since Evelyn passed, a hollow, steady pain, worse because it was deliberate, inflicted. Week 3. I tried one last time, without warning. Saturday morning, I drove over with a small wooden box I'd made for her art supplies. Nathan answered the door, his stance filling the frame. "Now's not a good time," he said. "When?" as I asked. He shrugged. "We'll let you know." "You said this was temporary," I reminded him. "It still is, but pushing isn't helping." His tone had that careful edge people use when they think they're holding all the cards. I took a slow breath. "Tell her I stopped by." He didn't answer, just closed the door. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the latch click into place. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what was happening. They were waiting for me to crack, to crawl back and say, "Fine, I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me see her." They thought the absence would grind me down, but all it did was sharpen something I'd kept sheet until now. That Monday morning, I called Kelman. "They've cut me off," I told him. "No visits, no calls, no nothing. It's been nearly a month." His voice was calm but direct. "Then we go to court." The words landed heavily. "You think it'll work?" In this state, grandparents have standing if they can prove a substantial relationship and harm from cutting it off. You've got both. You've been a consistent caregiver. You've got witnesses, Margaret, Sam, even your neighbor who's seen Lily over there every week. "I don't want to drag her through this," I said. "You're not dragging her. You're protecting her. Your connection to you, that matters in the court's eyes. And frankly, if we don't move now, they'll claim you've been absent voluntarily." We met at his office that afternoon. The air was cool inside, the blinds half closed. He'd already pulled the forms: petition for grandparent visitation, motion for temporary contact. "We're asking for a temporary order first," he explained, sliding the papers toward me. "That gets you back in contact while we prepare for the full hearing. Judges don't like the idea of a child losing a positive relationship during litigation." I read the documents slowly, the legal language dense but clear enough. Every petitioner was me. Every respondent was Nathan and Clara, my own son's name in black ink on the other side of the V, the kind of thing you never expect to see in your life. Kelman laid out the steps. "We'll file with the county court. They'll serve notice to Nathan and Clara. The first hearing will be for the temporary order, probably in a week or 2. After that, we build the case for permanent visitation." "What about them saying I'm unstable or unfit?" I asked. "Then we prove otherwise. Clean record, steady income, documented involvement in Lily's life. We've got photos, text messages, testimony. You've done nothing wrong, Arthur." I signed where he pointed, my pen scratching against the thick paper. Each signature felt like crossing a bridge you can't walk back over. When I left the office, the March wind was sharp enough to sting. I drove home with the radio off, my mind replaying every moment with Lily, painting on the porch, reading on the couch, fishing at the lake. If Nathan and Clara wanted to erase all that, they'd have to do it in front of a judge. That night, I pulled out the yellow pad and started a list. Every date Lily had been at my house in the last year, every holiday we'd spent together, every school event I'd attended. By midnight, the list was 3 pages long. Proof. Not just for the court, but for myself, that what we had was real, worth defending. The next morning, I called Margaret, told her what I was doing. She didn't hesitate. "You need me to testify, I'll be there." Sam said the same. Even Jenna, who'd witnessed that last kitchen meeting, agreed to put her notes into an affidavit. The following week, the court clerk called with a date, temporary order hearing, April 14th. 2 weeks away. 2 weeks until I could look Nathan and Clara in the eye in a courtroom and say, "This is not yours to take." I stood at the fence that afternoon, looking toward the horizon. The heron doesn't mind standing still, I thought again, but stillness isn't the same as surrender, and this fight was just beginning. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of scent that settles into wood and never leaves. I'd been here before, for property filings and zoning disputes, but never like this. Today, it wasn't about a boundary line on a map. It was about a living, breathing part of my life, a little girl with paint under her fingernails and a laugh you could pick out of a crowd. Kelman met me at the top of the courthouse steps. He was wearing his usual navy suit, his briefcase tucked tight under one arm. "They're already inside," he said. "They?" I asked, though I didn't need to. "Nathan, Clara, their attorney." I nodded. The words from that last kitchen conversation were still sharp in my memory. That's not love, that's leverage. We passed through security. The metal detector beeped at the change in my pocket. I dropped the coins into the plastic tray, watching them rattle to a stop. Every small noise felt amplified this morning. Inside the courtroom, the benches were half full. Margaret and Sam were there, seated together in the second row. Sam gave me a short nod. I spotted Jenna, too, her notary journal balanced on her lap, even though she wouldn't be recording anything today. Nathan sat at the respondent's table in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been worn to weddings and funerals alike. Clara was beside him, back straight, hair pulled into a tight knot. Her eyes slid over me once, unreadable, then back to the front. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and called the case, Petition for Grandparent Visitation, Arthur Bennett versus Nathan Bennett and Clara Bennett. Hearing my last name on both sides of the V felt like a strange kind of fracture. Kelman rose. "Your Honor, my client has been a consistent and positive presence in his granddaughter's life since her birth. He has served as a caregiver, provided for her needs, and maintained a close relationship with her until the respondents abruptly and without cause cut off all contact. We are seeking a temporary visitation order to preserve that relationship while the court considers the full petition." Their attorney stood. "Your Honor, my clients acted in the best interest of their daughter. The home environment at Mr. Bennett's residence has become contentious due to ongoing property disputes between the parties. They believe limiting contact is necessary until those matters are resolved." The judge looked at Nathan. "Mr. Bennett, is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor," Nathan said, his voice steady, practiced. "We just want a calm environment for Lily. This situation has made things tense." Kelman leaned toward me and whispered, "They're trying to make it sound mutual." When it was my turn to speak, Kelman asked me direct questions. "Mr. Bennett, can you describe your involvement in Lily's life before contact was cut off?" I told the judge about Saturday mornings making pancakes together, about walking her to the bus stop when Nathan was working early shifts, and about the afternoons she spent in my workshop building birdhouses. I didn't embellish. I didn't have to. "And when was the last time you saw her?" Kelman asked. "Over a month ago," I said. "They told me I wouldn't see her until I signed over my house and gave them power of attorney." A faint ripple went through the room. Clara's attorney objected, but the judge held up a hand. "I'll allow it. Continue." Kelman turned to Jenna in the gallery. "Miss Foster, could you please tell the court what you witnessed on February 17th? Jenna stood, voice clear. "I was present at Mr. Bennett's home as a neutral witness. I heard Mrs. Bennett state that unless Mr. Bennett signed the property transfer documents, he would not see his granddaughter. I wrote it down in my journal immediately." The judge asked to see the entry. Jenna handed it to the bailiff, who brought it up. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked at Nathan and Clara. "Did you make such a statement?" Clara shifted in her seat. "It was taken out of context." "Answer the question," the judge said. "Yes," Clara admitted, finally. "But that's enough," the judge said. Kelman rested his hands on the table. "Your Honor, this is not about a calm environment. It's about using a child as leverage in an unrelated dispute. That is precisely what the law seeks to prevent." Their attorney tried to pivot, talking about emotional strain and family autonomy, but the judge's expression didn't change. She made a few notes, then addressed both sides. "I'm granting the petitioner's motion for temporary visitation," she said. "Effective immediately, Mr. Bennett will have visitation with Lily every other weekend, beginning this Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at his residence. Exchanges will take place at the police substation parking lot for neutrality. I am also ordering both parties to refrain from making disparaging comments about each other in the child's presence." The gavel came down once. The sound was sharper than I expected. Nathan's jaw was tight, but he didn't look at me. Clara whispered something to him as they gathered their things. Kelman packed up his files. "This is a win," he said quietly. Temporary orders often set the tone for final ones. I nodded, but my focus was already on the Saturday ahead. When the court adjourned, Margaret squeezed my arm. You did the right thing. I hope she thinks so, I said. Saturday came, cold and clear. I got to the substation early, the yellow lines in the lot bright under the morning sun. At exactly 10 o'clock, Clara's SUV pulled in. Lily stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder. She spotted me and broke into a run before Clara could say anything. I knelt, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. Grandpa, she said, her voice muffled in my coat. I made a new heron. It's better than the last one. I pulled back enough to see her face, the same brightness as always. Can't wait to see it, I told her. Over her shoulder, Clara was already getting back into the SUV. For the first time in weeks, I didn't care what expression she wore. Lily was here. And for now, that was enough. Back at the house, she unpacked her paints at the kitchen table. The afternoon light caught in her hair, and the hum of the fridge was the only other sound. Watching her dip the brush, I realized something. Standing still like the heron isn't about waiting for the tide to turn on its own. It's about knowing when to strike. And this was only the first strike. I watched Nathan's taillights fade into the mist outside the courthouse, swallowed by a gray that felt like the earth itself wanted to close over this chapter. Clara followed behind, head down, phone pressed to her ear, her words fast and clipped. No sugar left in her voice, only the brittle scrape of someone who'd lost control. I didn't have to hear the conversation to know they were already trying to salvage something, anything. People like them never stopped scheming, but it didn't matter. The judges. Order was stamped, signed, and entered into the record. I would see Lily every week unsupervised. Starting now. Kelman walked beside me down the courthouse steps, his voice low, deliberate. You didn't just win today, Arthur. You took their strongest weapon and broke it in half. I nodded. The words were steady, but inside, the weight I'd been carrying didn't drop all at once. It loosened in slow spirals, like rope unwinding. Across the street, Margaret stood with Lily, who had been waiting the entire time. Her small frame was tense, eyes scanning every face until, there, she saw me. Her whole body seemed to light up from the inside. Then she was moving, faster than I'd ever seen her run. Her sneakers slapped the wet pavement, her hair flying behind her like a banner, until she crashed into me with a force that made my knees lock. Her arms locked around my waist, her face pressed so tight into my jacket I could feel her breath against my chest. You came back, she whispered, like those 3 words were the dam holding back weeks of fear. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the faint scent of paint still clinging to her sleeves. I never left you, Lily. Not here, I said, pressing a hand gently over my heart. She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Her lashes were wet, but her gaze was fierce. They said maybe you didn't want to see me anymore. The sentence cut through me like cold steel. I cupped her face in both hands. That will never be true. Not for a second. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She nodded, but her fingers didn't release my coat. Over her shoulder, I saw Nathan standing by his truck, arms crossed, jaw hard enough to crack teeth. Clara was next to him, lips pressed in a bloodless line. They didn't approach. They didn't speak. And for the first time, there was no spin between us, just a gap that would only widen from here. On the drive home, Lily's voice filled the car like sunlight creeping into a dark room. She talked about her art project, about how she decided the heron's wings needed streaks of brighter blue because birds should look like the sky they fly in. Not once did she mention Nathan or Clara. I didn't either. The court order might have given me weekends, but the real victory was here beside me, legs swinging, hands painting the air as she spoke. That evening, we walked down to the marsh together, the heron painting framed in oak under her arm. She set it against the old piling with care. It's finished now, she said softly. See? The wings are ready. I studied each brushstroke, deliberate. Each shade chosen with purpose. It's beautiful, I told her, just like the artist. Her smile was unguarded, free of the shadows I'd seen in recent months. And for a moment, the air felt lighter. When she went to bed, I stood in the doorway of the guest room for a long time, listening to the steady rise and fall of her breathing. That sound was peace, the kind I'd been chasing without realizing it. Downstairs, the manila envelope sat on the mantel, now heavier with certified copies of the order, the life estate deed, and my will, naming Lily as the one to inherit it all when the time came. Locks on the gates, both the kind you can see and the kind only I know are there. I thought about Nathan and Clara then, not with rage, but with clarity. Tonight, they'd return to their own home, sit in separate rooms, speak in clipped sentences, maybe argue about what went wrong. And somewhere in the quiet between them, they'd feel it. They hadn't just lost a legal battle. They'd lost their hold over me and over her. That's something no court can give back. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle like a calm hand over the house. Outside, the tide shifted with the wind steady, patient, inevitable. The heron doesn't mind standing still because it knows the stillness is part of the hunt. And I've learned the same. Stillness isn't surrender. It's the quiet strength to protect what matters until the moment comes to move. One day, when Nathan and Clara look back, they'll see me exactly where they tried to push me out, free, unshaken, and guarding the only treasure worth fighting for. Because in the end, the measure of a life isn't what you win, but what you refuse to lose.